Parents, in this video, I'm going to give you 8 tips on parenting your teen. This could be a very complicated subject. Raising teenagers in this world at this time is very difficult, but hopefully these 8 tips will at least get you started in thinking about how do I go about parenting my teen? Because I think for most of us as parents, our goal is to do it well. We don't want to just mamby-pamby through life and hope our kid turns out okay. But that kind of becomes our default response oftentimes because we don't know where to start. So here's 8 tips that hopefully could help you start thinking about how do I want to parent my teen. The first tip, remember you're the parent. That is so important for you to remember that you're the parent, they're the child. Now, in this stage of life, they're starting to flex their independent muscles and they're starting to think maybe they even know more than you do as a parent. But here's the truth. You're still the parent. You still have to be the tone setter in the home. You're the one that has to be leading your kids, and the teen in your home needs to understand that they're the kid, you're the parent. The second tip, lead with a plan. For any project that we undertake, right? Whether it's home improvement or a project at work, you start with a plan. You think about in advance, what are the supplies that we're gonna need? Who are the people that need to be involved? What's the money that's gonna need to be set aside? And we have a plan when we go into a project. And we need to see parenting your teens the same way. You need to formulate a plan. What are our goals? What do we hope that our kids learn from living in our home? What do we want them to be accomplishing at school, in sports, or other activities that they care about? And start thinking about and strategizing. So what do we need to have in place as the parent to help our kids accomplish those goals? The third tip, listen to your teens. That's really important. At this stage in their development, they're really starting to figure out, they're questioning their identity, who they are, and separate from their family and kind of putting themselves out there as their own person. So it's really important that they feel like you are showing them value, that they are trying to mature and to show independence. And so if we're not listening to our teenagers, if we don't spend any time talking to them about their fears, their concerns, the things that they're excited about, then we're kind of missing that opportunity to help them continue to grow and to really encourage them to continue to step out in their own independence within correct boundaries, of course. And a great way to do that is to do a devotional with your teen. To take time out of your week to not just be, we're running from dinner to practice to whatever it is that you're doing as a family, but to really stop and take time to listen to your teenager, to have meaningful conversations so you can start to learn more about their heart and start to understand more how you could cultivate that relationship. The fourth tip, have clear expectations for your teen. What I mean by that is, what's their function and role in the home? What are homework hours that need to be blocked off for that time? How much TV watching are they allowed? Do they need to be babysitting younger siblings sometimes? Do they have other chores they need to be taking care of? Really thinking about what are your expectations for your teen? How do you want them to be fitting in with the family life? And make sure that you're making that very clear to them. These are our expectations of you as your parent, and here's what you're going to do in response to that. That's very important for your teenagers to have clear, drawn out expectations so they know what you expect and you know what you expect, because that's going to be important as we go on in some of these tips and how that applies then to when expectations aren't being met. The fifth tip, discipline when needed. Now, this is important. So if we're going to have expectations of our teenagers, right, then we're going to expect that they're going to meet those expectations. Well, what happens if they don't? So discipline is important, and it's good for you to think in advance. Again, going back to that tip number 2 of having a plan and a strategy for parenting is, what are the consequences when certain expectations aren't met? If they didn't make their bed, for example, one morning, that probably has a different punishment, so to speak, than if they show up for their curfew 30 minutes late. You should think through a plan of what are the disciplinary actions when expectations aren't met, and have those lined out. And that is a really good conversation to have with your teenager when you're talking about the expectations, to say, and if you don't meet these expectations and you don't follow these rules, these are the consequences. This will be the discipline that you have. Discipline is very important. This is a key time for our teens to understand that Life doesn't go by their rules. They're going to have to live by the rules of their parents, of course, of their teachers, and eventually their bosses. That the world works, that someone's in charge, and we have to be accountable to that. And there are rules to our society that we have to follow. And it's best to teach them that now, and teach through the consequence when those things are broken is extremely important in their own personal development as an independent person. Another tip: allow for some self-expression of your teenager. I think that's really important within safe bounds that you, again, as parents decide. If it's they have a way they want to do their hair, okay. If there's certain ways they want to express themselves in the way they dress, allow those things to happen. If they want an ear piercing, be open to those ideas, because again, what we're trying to do here is to encourage your teenager to start to develop their identity and their independence. Now, we need to coach and help them along in that, but I think meeting them in some places along the way of saying, you really seem interested in this particular thing, or you seem to really like this color, or this hairstyle you seem to really want, that on certain things within safe boundaries that you'd be willing to say, I'll give you that. I'll move our boundary line a little bit so you can feel like you can express yourself a little bit. I think that's a really good thing to get some buy-in from your teenager, that they trust that your heart isn't just to be the rule keeper and here's the way it has to go, that you're really open to the idea of they're their own person too, and you want them to be able to express themselves. The next tip: have very clear rules about phone, internet, social media. This is really important, and I think a great way to do that is to sit down with your teen and to talk to them about the potential dangers. What is happening with people in using phones and the things that people are doing on social media, and just the overwhelming access these kids have to information right there on their phone that they have with them all the time. You should have very clear boundaries of when the phone should be used, putting the phone up on the kitchen counter at night before they go to bed, that you are around and watching, that you have access to their phone or their computer at any point to see all of their accounts. You have access to everything, so you can make sure that the things that they're doing online are safe, that the things that they're doing with their phone are responsible. And it's really important, again, going back to that very first tip, you're the parents. It's your responsibility to lead your kids. Make sure that you have very clear rules about phone usage, online, social media. Here's the last tip. It's all about earning trust. Remember that, parents. This is a great format for you to come to your teenager and say, you're going to want to flex more of your independent muscle. Well, you have to earn our trust, that you're responsible, that you're respectful, and that you have the right motives to the decisions that you make. And earning trust is going to be the key component for you to know if your teenager's ready for more independence, or a later curfew, or more freedom in certain areas. Your teenager needs to understand that everything they say, everything that they do is either putting a deposit in that trust account or making withdrawals. So every missed expectation is not earning trust. But every time that you see that your teenager is meeting your expectations, really working at following the rules, honoring you, and making good decisions, then those are the opportunities that you can say then, you know what? You've really earned my trust in this particular area. I'm going to give you some more freedoms. And it's a great kind of give and take exchange where your teenager understands there's a purpose to what you're trying to do as a parent, and that as the teen, that they can react to what those purposes are and recognize that they can work towards then more independence as they mature and show that they're responsible. So use those tips and see what a difference it can make in parenting of your teen.